You know what that sound means? Time now for a look at the biggest news in entertainment. Blake Lively, again, attempting to dismiss the $400 million lawsuit.
You've been following the Justin Baldoni, Blake Lively thing?
Bro, Blake Lively, talk about ruin your reputation, and Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah, they up. Ryan's trying to get out of it now. He's trying to get out of the lawsuit, and they're like, you were a
All right, buckle up, because this story is like peeling back the layers of an onion dipped in gasoline, every layer more flammable than the last. A Hollywood scandal like this doesn't just happen. It brews, it simmers, and then it explodes. And when you've got names like Blake Lively, Ryan Reynolds, and Justin Baldoni tangled in what looks like a meticulously orchestrated chess match gone rogue, you know the stakes aren't just high, they're stratospheric.
It was the publicist Leslie Sloan, then it was Ryan Reynolds, and now it's Blake Lively claiming that it was vengeful and...
Let's start with the key piece that's flipped this entire saga on its head. Lively's secret lawsuit. Yes, secret. A lawsuit so covert that it was practically invisible until someone decided to crack open Pandora's legal box. And here's the kicker, it wasn't filed under her name. No, that would have been too obvious, too traceable. Instead, it was filed under a seemingly nondescript corporate entity called Van Zandt Incorporated. Sounds like a random shell company, right? Well, it's not. Turns out this shadowy little LLC has Blake Lively's fingerprints all over it. She's listed as the CEO, the secretary, and even the chief financial officer. It's her baby, her creation, her legal cloak to operate in the shadows. And what did this company do? It filed a lawsuit against a group of unnamed defendants, 10 of them to be exact, referred to only as does. No names, no specifics, just a vague accusation of harming the company's reputation and business. But let's not kid ourselves. This wasn't about protecting any business operations. This was about one thing and one thing only: getting access to private communications. Let's rewind to how this all began to unravel. The timeline is where the real chaos lives. Back in July, Jennifer Abel, a PR staffer working under Stephanie Jones, handed in her resignation. Now, resignations happen every day in the entertainment industry, but this one sent shockwaves through Jones Works, Stephanie's PR firm. Why? Because Abel wasn't just any employee. She was the one managing Justin Baldoni's account during the promotional tour for It Ends With Us. And when she decided to go independent, Baldoni and his company Wayfarer Studios decided to follow her out the door. That's when Stephanie Jones went into full panic mode. Losing a high-profile client like Baldoni wasn't just a financial hit, it was a blow to her ego, to her reputation, to the carefully curated image of power she'd built in Hollywood. And Stephanie Jones doesn't take blows like that lying down.
Well, I do think the damages for Baldoni could be very considerable, definitely in the 100 million range or above that, which is obviously problematic.
Reports suggest that this resignation triggered a series of escalating moves that would eventually drag everyone into a legal and PR nightmare. On August 21, just 2 days before Abel's official last day, Jones reportedly confiscated Abel's company phone under the guise of compliance with a subpoena. Now let's pause here for a second, because this is where things start to smell fishy. At that point, no lawsuit existed, no subpoena had been filed, so what was Jones claiming to comply with? According to Abel, the phone wasn't just a work device. It was her personal phone, the one she'd been using for years. Imagine the audacity of being told to hand over your entire digital life under the threat of legal action. Texts, photos, emails, everything, only to later find out there was no legitimate basis for it. It's like something out of a psychological thriller. Fast forward to September 27, and here comes the lawsuit. Filed quietly, buried under legal jargon, and designed to stay off the radar. The language in the complaint was so vague, it might as well have been written in invisible ink. It accused the unnamed defendants of vague misconduct, like failing to act in the plaintiff's best interests and disclosing confidential information. But here's the thing, the lawsuit never named any actual defendants. It was a legal placeholder, a Trojan horse, created for one purpose: to issue subpoenas. And oh, did they issue subpoenas? 4 days after the lawsuit was filed, Stephanie Jones sent one to herself, effectively retroactively justifying her confiscation of Abel's phone. It's like crafting the backstory for a crime after you've already committed it. And the gall of it all? This wasn't just about covering tracks. It was about weaponizing the legal system to dig up dirt, to gain leverage, to control the narrative.
Now, the million-dollar question for all of us that were looking at this was, what subpoena was Stephanie Jones complying with? There was no lawsuit. This went down in August, right? There was no lawsuit until December. What subpoena was she
Now, let's talk about the phone, because this device has become the Pandora's box of this entire scandal. When Abel's phone was handed over, it reportedly contained a treasure trove of private messages between her, Baldoni, and crisis PR consultant Melissa Nathan. These messages, when selectively leaked to the press, painted a damning picture of a coordinated smear campaign against Lively. In one particularly explosive text, Nathan allegedly wrote, "We can bury anyone." Another message supposedly detailed a strategy to destroy Lively's reputation. On paper, it looks like the smoking gun Lively's team needed to go after Baldoni. But here's the problem. The way these messages were obtained raises serious ethical and legal questions. And the deeper you dig, the murkier it gets. For one, Baldoni's team has claimed that the texts were taken out of context, selectively edited to fit a narrative. They've released fuller versions of the conversations, which seem to show a very different story, one where Baldoni and his team were reacting to what they perceived as Lively's own underhanded tactics. It's a classic case of he said, she said, but with millions of dollars and reputations on the line. And then there's the question of timing. Lively's team reportedly had access to these messages months before the lawsuit was filed. How? Baldoni's lawyer Brian Friedman has openly questioned whether Lively's team had already seen the texts by late August, which would suggest that the subpoena was just a formality, a way to retroactively justify evidence they already had.
They're trying to work backwards to legitimize something that they likely stole. So I'm going to read you directly from this sham lawsuit. It writes, it accuses the 10 Jane Does of, quote, "They have participated and may continue to participate in efforts to harm plaintiff, including by failing to act in plaintiff's best interests, taking actions to their personal benefit at plaintiffs."
Let's not forget about Van Zandt Incorporated, the mysterious LLC at the center of this drama. Public records show that Van Zandt was established in Delaware, a state notorious for its corporate secrecy. It's the kind of place where shell companies go to hide, where paper trails go to disappear. And while it's officially listed as an entertainment company, its only recorded business activity before this lawsuit was importing home goods, fabric, furniture, and doors, directly to Blake and Ryan's Westchester estate. That's right, the LLC that filed a lawsuit to protect its business operations had never actually done any business in entertainment. It's as if the entire entity was created for the sole purpose of this legal maneuver. And if that doesn't sound shady, we don't know what does. But here's where things get even more twisted. Van Zandt's address in New York City, it matches the office of a PR agency connected to Blake Lively's publicist, Leslie Sloan. And who else has ties to this address? Liz Plank, the journalist who later published a glowing piece about Lively that conveniently framed her as the victim of a smear campaign. Coincidence, maybe? But when you start connecting the dots, it begins to look less like a random series of events and more like a carefully orchestrated operation.
Blake Lively. So there's a connection here between all of the players that we have seen involved and this sham lawsuit. These are just the facts, okay? Case closed, my friend.
And let's not overlook the role of the New York Times in all of this. The messages from Abel's phone were first leaked to the Times in October, weeks before Lively filed her harassment complaint against Baldoni. The Times ran with the story, framing the leaked texts as evidence of a malicious campaign against Lively. But here's the thing, the timing of the leaks suggests that Lively's team was already working with the Times before the lawsuit was even filed. Was this all part of a larger strategy to control the narrative, to preemptively paint Baldoni as the villain? And if so, who was pulling the strings? Was it Lively, Ryan Reynolds, Leslie Sloan? Or was this a coordinated effort involving multiple players, each with their own agenda? What's clear is that this isn't just a case of he said, she said. This is a battle of power, of influence, of who can outmaneuver whom in the cutthroat world of Hollywood. And as the legal drama unfolds, it's becoming increasingly apparent that this is about more than just reputations. This is about control over the narrative, over the industry, over who gets to come out on top. And while the public watches, hungry for the next twist, one question looms over it all. Just how far are they willing to go?
And he's suing the New York Times, and he's got a great case
He's
there,
going hard
too.
in the paint. But
He
that's
should.
what it takes.
That's what it takes.
It's like Johnny Depp.
Yeah.
He's like, all right.
Yeah.
He did for the boys.
Exactly. You got to do it.
You need real to be like, nah, man, I ain't going out like this.
Yeah, especially a guy like that. It was like known as being like this really sweet, nice guy.
Yep.
And then it's like, all right.
And it doesn't stop there. No, this tangled web gets even stickier the further you go, because while the public was left gawking at the headline-grabbing accusations, behind the scenes, a much darker, more calculated game was being played, a game where the rules weren't just bent, they were shattered. Let's dive deeper into how this entire scheme wasn't just about legal maneuvering, it was about power plays, reputational warfare, and the unchecked audacity of Hollywood elites who thought they'd never get caught. Here's something that barely anyone noticed at first: the timing of Blake Lively's formal complaint to the California Civil Rights Department. That filing, which accused Justin Baldoni of workplace misconduct, came just one day after the Van Zandt lawsuit was quietly dismissed. One day, think about that. After months of supposedly gathering evidence via subpoenas, all of it conveniently tied to that sham lawsuit, they suddenly dropped it like it never existed. Why? Because the real purpose of the lawsuit was already served. They had what they needed: the messages, the dirt, the ammunition. The lawsuit itself was never meant to go anywhere. It was a decoy, a smokescreen, a tool to extract evidence under the guise of legality. And once it outlived its usefulness, they swept it under the rug, assuming no one would ever think to dig it back up.
Regarding this Blake, Ryan, Justin case, that things may have just transformed from civil to criminal, and I'll tell you why. And like I said, in case you somehow missed the updates over the weekend, don't worry, sit down, because this is going to...
But here's the problem with sweeping things under the rug. Sometimes the lump gets too big to ignore. Enter Brian Friedman, Baldoni's attorney, who seems to have made it his personal mission to shine a spotlight on every shady move in this saga. Friedman has been vocal, relentlessly vocal, about what he calls an abusive process, and honestly, he might be onto something. Because when you start piecing together how this puzzle fits, it's hard not to wonder if the entire legal strategy was designed not to win in court, but to wage a war of perception. A war where every leaked message, every carefully timed headline, was a weapon aimed directly at Baldoni's career. And speaking of perception, let's talk about the New York Times expose that dropped the very next day after Lively's CRD filing. At first glance, it seemed like a straightforward piece of investigative journalism, a bombshell report uncovering the alleged scheme to tarnish Lively's reputation. But when you start looking closer, things don't add up. For one, the article relied heavily on those text messages from Abel's confiscated phone, messages that, as we now know, were obtained under highly questionable circumstances. And yet, the Times presented them as if they had fallen from the heavens, pure and untainted. No mention of the shadow lawsuit, no acknowledgement of how those messages were acquired, just a one-sided narrative that painted Baldoni as the mastermind of a coordinated attack. Convenient, isn't it?
But without question, this is the most explosive update since it all began. It's the final piece of the puzzle. It pulls everybody in: the New York Times, the PR firms. Brian Friedman must be having an absolute field day. And by the way, I want to say this could have all been avoided if they had listened to me when I told them drop the...
But wait, there's more, because this wasn't just about framing Baldoni. Oh no, this was about building a fortress around Lively, a fortress so impenetrable that even the slightest whisper of criticism would bounce right off. Look at the timing of everything: the lawsuit, the subpoenas, the CRD filing, the media coverage. It's like a symphony, each note perfectly timed to create a crescendo of outrage against Baldoni, while simultaneously casting Lively as the victim. And who was conducting this orchestra? Well, that's where things get murky. Because while Lively's legal team was busy playing defense, there's evidence to suggest that her PR machine, led by Leslie Sloan, was working overtime to control the narrative.
Well, I don't think it would be what it was, because this whole thing has just come off as like a very odd episode. You know, like you're the actor in the movie. Normally, when you signed up to act in it, you didn't sign up to be the co-writer or anything like that. So the whole thing, and then like doing your own edit, like
You're talking about Blake Lively's behavior on this, basically.
Yeah, like that.
Let's not forget Sloan's history. This is a woman who's built her career on managing crises for some of Hollywood's biggest stars. She's not just a publicist, she's a fixer. And if the rumors are true, she's not afraid to get her hands dirty. Multiple insiders have suggested that Sloan was the one who orchestrated the leaks to the Times, feeding them just enough information to craft a story that would dominate headlines while keeping the messier details, like the Van Zandt lawsuit, out of sight. And if that's the case, it raises a whole new set of questions. Questions about journalistic integrity, about the complicity of the media, and about how far some people are willing to go to protect their image. But let's not let Stephanie Jones off the hook here, because her role in this drama is just as fascinating and just as damning. Remember, she's the one who confiscated Abel's phone in the first place, and while she's tried to justify it by claiming she was complying with a subpoena, the timeline tells a different story. The subpoena wasn't issued until weeks after the phone was taken, meaning Jones acted first and worried about the legalities later. And why? To protect her business? To settle a personal vendetta against Abel? Or was it something bigger, something orchestrated from above?
Stephanie Jones was really motivated by wanting to go after a former employee, which I give her a little more credit for. It's a little more sane. right? Blake was like, this can't be real press against me. Everybody loves me. A little credit there too. She's motivated by sheer stupidity. But Ryan Reynolds, evil. he's the ultimate villain in this.
And then there's Ryan Reynolds. Oh yes, we're going there, because while he's managed to keep a relatively low profile in all of this, his fingerprints are all over the place. From the Van Zandt LC to the connections with Liz Plank, Reynolds seems to be the silent architect behind many of these moves. And when you consider his reputation as a savvy businessman and a master of public relations, it's hard not to wonder if he's the one pulling the strings. After all, this isn't his first rodeo. He knows how to play the game, how to manipulate the media, how to turn a bad situation into a branding opportunity. So the question is, what's his endgame? Is he simply protecting his wife? Or is there something more at stake? Let's not forget the collateral damage here, because while Lively and Reynolds were busy building their fortress, Baldoni was left to fend off a storm of accusations that threatened to destroy everything he's worked for. And for what? A movie? A role? A reputation? At what point does the cost outweigh the benefit? And how do you come back from something like this when the court of public opinion has already rendered its verdict?
Here that I wanted to follow up on. You said that it could be disconcerting to a studio if you have someone who is going to conduct themselves professionally, like it's alleged that Blake Lively did, taking over these roles, etc. Would you go so far as to say then this is very unusual behavior? Because some people have tried to tell me, who support Blake Lively online, have tried to tell me that this is just...
But here's the real kicker. This isn't just about Lively or Baldoni or even Reynolds. This is about a system that allows the rich and powerful to bend the rules, to manipulate the narrative, to weaponize the legal system for their own gain. It's about how far people are willing to go to protect their image, even if it means destroying someone else's in the process. And it's about the rest of us, watching from the sidelines, wondering if we'll ever get the full story, or if the truth will remain buried under layers of spin and deception.
This lawsuit, yeah, we got it, Noah, but I am. So tell me what's gonna happen, because this must now trip into criminality, right? You can't steal someone's phone and then try to legitimatize it. And this is why people hate rich people. I wanna be very clear, because they do theft in a different way. Like if you were just a poor person and you stole a Snickers bar at a gas station, you're getting arrested. But like Stephanie Jones has like the money and the wealth to steal.
So here's the question. How much of this is strategy and how much is desperation? Is this a case of a Hollywood power couple leveraging their influence to protect what's theirs? Or is it something darker? A calculated campaign to silence dissent and crush anyone who gets in their way? Let us know what you think in the comments below, and trust us, this story is far from over. Stay tuned, because if there's one thing we've learned, it's that in Hollywood, the drama never truly ends. See you in the next one.